At the end of 2020, Ghost of Tsushima received the Player's Voice Award as the best game of that year. This took me by surprise, considering that three much more complete and better games were nominated and yet lost to Ghost of Tsushima by a wide margin. Considering that my personal rankings of the games was so much different from the player's voice, I decided to give the game another chance. In fact, I 100%ed the game, and I do regret to say that after doing so, my opinion of the game did not change. In fact, after playing through everything that the game had to offer, I came to despise it.
Why are you the way that you are? Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way. I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
This game fails to engage the player at any point. The best example of this being the combat system. If you make a game that follows the story of a samurai gone rogue, slaying whole Mongolian hordes, you gotta have good combat. Yet, Sucker Punch thinks that a generic parry and spam attack formula was a good choice. The combat isn't fun, challenging, or engaging. You just parry incoming attacks, go into slow-mo to choose a stance that is the most effective against the nearest guy, and then mash triangle. Even on the hardest difficulty, you learn all the combat within the first hour and its concepts are never taken further. This game has actually managed to make its combat system infuriating due to the fact that it doesn't have a lock-on system and the camera controls are by far the worst I've ever seen in any game. I want to address the developer's excuse for not adding a lock-on system. They said that adding the lock-on mechanic to the game would ultimately hinder the player's ability to effectively fight enemies. No. It would actually make it easier. And I really hope I don't have to go through why, but I will anyways. Shooter games don't need lock-on, because the player needs to aim at what he wants to hit with the center of his screen. This keeps him engaged. Meanwhile, in Ghost of Tsushima, which is a third-person sword fighter, the camera is never set, it pans, zooms, and shifts at its own will. Therefore, the absence of a lock-on makes precise strikes frustrating. If lock-on was a feature, the player can instead be focused on delivering well-timed combos, which would make the combat a little more engaging, but this game doesn't have combos. Lock-on could also prevent the mass confusion whenever you take part of any large-scale battle. During these, the colors of the Mongols and the samurai just mix and match. One fight, the Mongols are red, blue, and yellow, then your allies are blue and yellow, and sometimes the Mongolians are black. This is just another frustrating oversight that makes me think that no actual thought or effort was put into this game. I mean, what is the point of even fighting these archers? You simply hold block, deflect anything they shoot at you from any direction like you're some sort of Jedi, and then you run up to them and kill them in one hit. And the stealth mechanics in this game are laughable. My biggest problem with the stealth approach is that the entire story revolves around how much the main character follows the Bushido code. It is blatant from the start that you're supposed to face the enemies head on because it is the honorable thing to do. Yet, no matter how often you decide to stealthily clear a Mongol camp and how often you use poison, it will not have any effect on the story. The stealth approach is even easier than normal combat due to the fact that you can one-shot any enemy, and can even do chain assassinations to kill up to 3 at once. However, it is very time-consuming, and quite frankly, boring. The enemies are blind. You can stand in front of them covered in blood and just turn a corner and they won't even care. They also seem completely unfazed by dead bodies unless they physically trip over them. This again just makes the entire approach easy. And just like normal combat, the concept is never taken further other than what you see in the first few hours of the game. You could make the argument that poison, hallucination darts, and chain assassinations give you more options, but in reality it just makes your job easier. And you also get these things fairly early into the game. Stealth also offers no special rewards. It simply just makes encounters take way longer than they should. There have been several games in the last decade that have managed to make both their stealth and head-on approaches uniquely rewarding, such as Dishonored, yet Ghost of Tsushima attempts to warrant an $80 price tag, while a huge chunk of its gameplay is designed with no real perspective on how it rewards, challenges, or engages the player for his efforts. That, however, only refers to the combat chunk of the game. Story also plays an important role, and I have to say, It too is incredibly disappointing. Managing to make a boring story out of an interesting historic event is yet another achievement Sucker Punch Studios should not be proud of. The story is something we've seen dozens of times before through the 2010s era. It was predictable, the betrayals, the main character's actions, and the resolution could all be seen from the beginning. As you plow through the story you've already experienced with many other games, you will encounter scores of uninteresting, bland, and forgettable characters, all of which are animated as if their faces are made of stone and speak as if they're text-to-speech bots. There was rarely any emotion, despite the betrayal, loss, sacrifice, and trauma that the characters face. None of them express or vent their emotions in a way that can make the player like or sympathize with them. The main character, whose name I've honestly forgotten, I believe it's Sucky, struggles with accepting the fact that he must break the Bushido code in order to keep his people safe. This character arc is finished before you even fully delve into the game. However, Sucky's choices create conflict with his mentor and father figure, who I only remember as Uncle. Now, the uncle is very disciplined and honorable to the Bushido code. No matter how many lives it costs, he will always maintain his vision of integrity. While this makes him seem evil, it at least makes him respectable. However, the uncle just falls out of character upon learning Sucky had killed a Mongol camp by poisoning their drinks. He instantly turns to the option of framing someone else for his nephew's crime and lying to the shogun, which is insanely hypocritical and made me lose the little respect I had for the one distinguished character. The side quests in the game explore the stories of the other main characters. These quests, too, are generic. For example, hunting down the killer of a character's brother to avenge his death, or hunting down some old sensei student who had betrayed him. On top of the stories of the side quests lacking grip over the player's interest, the actual playing through the quest is even more exhausting than listening to these generic characters whining about their generic problems with their bland voice acting. Let's take this mission for example. We start with a cutscene. Walk for 15 seconds while being blinded by the stupid lighting system, reach another cutscene, follow footprints, have a quick fight, yet another cutscene, and the quest is over. I went through this absurd follow, cutscene, track, fight, and cutscene formula over 60 times. 60. I was bored after the first one, and after just 10, I began to lose my mind. It was just the same thing over and over again. Every time I saw another Tsushima Tales icon pop up on my map, I wanted to cry.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Let's move over to talking about the open world and the exploration. It is undeniable that the open world is stunning. I mean, the color palette alone, you have blue, yellow, white, orange, red, gold, gray, green, and it always creates a beautiful scene that makes you want to explore the world. However, the game yet again falls short. Every open world in a game should be distinct, either through its biomes defining regions or through landmarks. This way, the player feels like he's actually exploring the world and not aimlessly wandering around task to task, and that's exactly how Tsushima Island feels. The only exception is the northern region, which is layered in snow, and the coast, which has gray beaches. Otherwise, you could be at any point of the map, and it makes exploring really tedious, while removing any identity the game's open world could have had. To be able to see points of interest, first you need to clear dozens of camps, clear several villages, and retake numerous checkpoints. After you've gone through all the trouble, you just have to fast travel near points of interest, ride to them, complete the repetitive shrine, bamboo strike, duel, hot spring, or haiku, and move on. The open world has never taken me by surprise, and I never felt rewarded for my exploration. The fox dens were by far the most tedious. It's just a dumbed down trailing mission to a shrine that awards you with a fifth of an award. Then you do 4 more and realize the struggle wasn't even worth your time. The climbing system is insultingly linear, yet at times it isn't clear where to go, such as when you're trying to reach shrines to honor. The climbing and swinging leaves no risk and just acts as yet another cutscene which does not grab your attention. Even if you manage to find an alternate path, you're only rewarded with a measly amount of supplies with which you can upgrade your character's gear. This brings us to my last major point, the character skill development and gear system. You get all the materials you need simply by picking up items as you go along through quests or points of interest such as Mongol camps. With that, you make your strong gear even stronger to the point where every enemy is a two-shot given that you're using the right stance. Even if you do get overwhelmed by enemies, you have too many skills to rely on. Your Ghost stance gives you an easy, free 3 kills. The Heavenly Strike gives you 3 free hits. On top of that, you have Smoke Bombs, which instantly incapacitate enemies around you. And with that, you get a Chain Assassination, and that's yet another free 3 kills. None of these special moves offer a risk and reward feel. They just act like get-out-of-jail-free cards when you mess up the simple parry and spam combat system. That's not all though. You also have kunai, which are free staggers, bombs, which are free individual kills, and bows, which give you free slow-mo to line up headshots. It's all just mind-numbingly overpowered, and it makes me question how anyone had any issue with this game's difficulty and even came to the idea of comparing it to Sekiro's combat system. Another great example of horrible game design is the way that this game has you increase your health and resolve. You just walk to a waypoint, listen to a cringe dialogue cutscene, and boom, extra HP. And for resolve, you just play a 30-second minigame that your dog could beat if he chewed on your controller. I will say though, that I do like the way the resolve system works in combat. You earn the right to special moves through consistency. However, the special moves themselves are the problem. They shouldn't be free kills and hits, but options for more creative ways to control duels. I quickly want to go over some bullet points I couldn't quite place in my previous parts, some minor issues and compliments that appeared consistently through my playthrough. Not every duel needs to start with an identical 15-second cringy cutscene. Being locked in place and having to listen to stupid NPC dialogue every time you free a hostage, which you'll do well over 100 times, is incredibly annoying. The standoff system is very enjoyable and never gets old. It is the one and only high-risk, high-reward feature in the game. If you mistime a strike, you're brought down to minimum HP, and that is fair. Despite fully liberating Tsushima, corpses still litter liberated villagers, which themselves are still burnt, and random bodies are still found on main roads. What I'm trying to say here is that despite fully beating the game and going through the effort of 100%ing it, I didn't feel as if the open world I was a part of changed as a result. And that really bothered me. The random encounters with Mongolian patrols are just annoying. Random encounters should feel unique and be a refreshing break from the main game. It also does not make sense that Mongol patrols would plague the land after you just cleared every camp on the island and beat the game. This kind of builds off the last point. The climbing system is not utilized enough when you are trying to get up cliffs and mountains. A lot of the time, you're forced to fast travel or go around the long way. The textures on armors and weapons are definitely among the best we see today. It was beautifully done. The main villain Khan was underused, and his boss battle was no different from any other fight you could have in the game. In quest-based battles, it's far easier to just run past all the enemies to get to the main point and finish the quest, such as the final boss battle. The character animation on horse and foot is often comically silly, but not in a good way. The soundtrack was amazing. It always fit the mood of whatever the player was experiencing, and it did hold the immersion of the game together. I also want to touch on some historical inaccuracies I noticed. Now, this might seem like nitpicking. However, the developers of the game constantly bragged about the reality of their game and its immersion, and here are some main points they got wrong. The katana did not exist during this game's time period. While the Bushido Code stated that you must face enemies head-on, dishonorable enemies were not applicable to this rule. They could be killed any way that the samurai pleased. This is a major story plot hole because literally the entirety of this game's story and the main character's arc revolves around this concept. If they actually did their research, they would know this and would probably base the story around something else and could potentially have made it more interesting. The hwacha did not exist during this game's time period. The kunai was never used as a throwing weapon, but as a gardening tool for peasants, and it too did not exist during this game's time period. The Mongols brought gunpowder as a weapon of war for the first time to Japan during the Battle of Komoda Beach. The samurai in the game seem unfazed by its presence, when in reality it made some of them freeze in fear. The haiku did not exist during this time period. And finally, there are no bears in Tsushima. The only bears in Japan are the Japanese black bears, which on average are the size of a fat middle school kid. To conclude this review, I'll say this. The game is not worthy to be a nominee of any Game of the Year award aside from the Best Art Direction category, and it should not have won the Player's Voice Award. We need to stop praising and overpaying for mediocrity in the gaming industry. This game has been ranked the best PlayStation exclusive of all time. For me, it is by far the worst PlayStation exclusive I've personally played, including the first Uncharted game, which is old enough to order a beer in some places. I feel like this game only appeals to people who have a strong love for Japanese history and culture. However, this fandom blinds lots of players from the game's mediocrity and its lack of depth. Now, on this channel, we'll place games on their corresponding tier list to rank them among similar games. We'll also place them to their corresponding mechanics compass graph. Here's my graph for open world games. Ghost of Tsushima belongs in the top left. Ideally, we want the game to be as close to the center as possible. As for this game's tier list ranking, it will perfectly define the D tier. It was shallow, boring, repetitive, and unengaging all throughout. Feel free to leave any comments regarding your own opinion of the game. I will always do my best to engage with you guys, and I will truly appreciate all constructive criticism you throw my way. We can also discuss anything y'all want on Twitter. Feel free to subscribe so you get notified about my next open world game review. Also, tell me what games you'd want to get ranked among its competitors. I'll see you then.